Hello and welcome to the Unofficial Maritime Wrestling Podcast. Back with another interview. The boys are back in town. Corey, Jason, Mark, they're all here. And once again, our special guest, good friend of the podcast now, the grandson of the legendary Al Zink, Dave Arthur. How's it going?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks so much for having me back.
Pleasure. So, we thought we covered everything in the first one, and we clearly didn't.
It's impossible to cover everything in one go.
So there's two specific years that we didn't really go into detail for, 77 and 84. And Mark, kudos to Mark. He really kept notes on everything that we missed. And kudos to you, Dave, for your scrapbook. Like, you have, if there is one person that has the knowledge on international wrestling, on ESA, it's Dave Arthur. 77, Mark, we had a little bit of a conversation before we started recording on the final International Tag Team Champions as listed on multiple websites. But, Dave, could you go into this? Jack and Jerry Briscoe are listed as the final International Tag Team Champions. That's the tag team trophies. This doesn't make sense to you.
It doesn't, no. And I don't know where that came from. The only Briscoe brother that was here, to my knowledge, was Jack Briscoe when he was NWA World Heavyweight Champion in 1975. And he defended that against Leo Burke. So I don't know if there was a transition with the tag titles to a different territory, and they had given them up to a different territory, but where that comes from, I have no idea. I have no information at all on them being tag team champions, but it's definitely worth looking into to see where those titles might have ended up and why they're listed as international tag team champions.
In being how could I put this in a nice way for myself? Being a giant nerd for professional wrestling.
A historian. We like to call him a historian.
There you go.
Sorry, a mark for. I don't like to flatter Corey that much personally. I like to keep his head down inside.
We like to keep him humble.
There you go. But in looking into multiple titles in history, there are some websites that will mix up titles that had the same names.
Cage Match is definitely by far one of the worst for that.
Yeah.
They refer to their North American Championship as just the NWA North American Championship when it was the ESA North American Championship.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Stampede had their own version. But, when it comes to names of titles, and not only that, there's a ton of territories named international wrestling throughout the course of, wrestling history. So it's very possible that they conflated the two with a different set of titles.
Yeah.
But I would like to look into just the name of the title and where they may have held those titles in that territory.
Yeah.
So one thing I noticed, though, just really quick before we move on from this, is that on WrestlingTitles.com, this particular title, the International Tag Team title, is listed under the NWA outfit.
Well, they were an NWA affiliate in 75 and 76.
So that's when the NWA, they became an NWA affiliate, not before that.
Right. No,
I had an argument with someone about that, and they were like, well, number one, it wasn't international, it was Grand Prix.
That's right.
And I was like, no, it's international. And they were like, from which years? And I'm like, that's a good question. So it's 75 and 76.
75 and 76. And to my knowledge, Grand Prix never had an NWA affiliate. Ric Flair came to defend the belt in 84 when he was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, but they never had their NWA affiliation, to my knowledge.
From what I understand, Ric Flair came down for a week. Defended the title twice.
Against Stephen Pettipaw.
Stephen Pettipaw, and then hit the bricks. He was like, this place is not for me. And that's around the same time where Rick Martel defended versus Leo Burke in International.
That's right. And they had initially wanted Ric Flair. I mean, we mentioned this in part one of the interview. They initially wanted Ric Flair to come to International. I don't know what fell through there, but they ended up getting Rick Martel, and to me, that was the better storyline anyways, because he got his career start in international. He had the AWA World Heavyweight Championship, and and to me, the better storyline is for him to come with the big title and defend it in the Maritimes, where it all started for him.
You mentioned Rick Martel there. He wrestled as Pat Kelly in international. Mm-hmm. Here's a question. I don't remember asking this in the first interview. Was there any working relationship? Like, I know there was Florida at one point, but was there any working relationships with your grandfather and, let's say, like Quebec or something like that?
A lot of the Montreal guys came up from that area. It's the main working relationships that he had with the other Canadian territories. The biggest one would have been Stampede.
Yeah,
and he always had a lot of praise for Stu Hart. I mean, many of the guys from Maple Leaf, they made their way up here as well. And then the other one would have been Montreal, and just the Grand Prix wrestling from down there.
Yeah, that lasted in the mid '70s, so around the peak time.
That's right.
That we would have seen international wrestling. I'm sure the Vachons must have made the trip to international.
They were there in the beginning, like when they first started, like probably 69, 70. But I think they had a better relationship with Dupree.
Yeah. We mentioned 77. And Mark, before this, mentioned that International had World Tag Team Championships. Mm-hmm. Could we get into... Because we didn't get into it a lot, but there was a split in 77. Your grandfather was on one side, the roster was on the other, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of Memphis talent that comes into the Maritimes. Could you get into that one?
Yeah, 77 is an interesting year. Al and the Cormiers parted ways, and they just, they had their differences. But then you'll see there is just an influx of talent from the Memphis area. And I think the guy that had a lot to do with that might have been Tommy Gilbert. He was there in 1976. He held the North American Championship at the beginning of 1976. He's really the only guy that you can connect those dots. That's okay. Maybe that was the connection as to why there was this influx of talent from Memphis. But unfortunately, nobody knew who they were. And when you look at it, in hindsight, that's an all-star roster. In 77, you had young Terry Gordy. He was just a kid. I think he was, maybe 16 at the most. You had Don Fargo. You had Dave Schultz, who was one of the big stars. There was the Bicentennial Kings, Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson. Yeah. And those are the main ones that stick out at that time. But unfortunately, they didn't connect the local fans.
Yeah. At that point in time, the Bicentennial Kings, they had a version of a World Tag Team Championships. Mm-hmm. Here's my question. Was your grandfather still affiliated with the NWA in 77?
He was not, no. That's when he lost his affiliation. I think the main reason they earned that affiliation was because of Rudy Kay. Okay. He was the guy that had all the connections, plus his history with Crockett, that they have a pretty decent history down there in the Mid-Atlantics. So I think he was the connection with the NWA and everything else. But after they had split, the affiliate, that went away too. And Al, I think it was the Canadian Heavyweight Championship. That's what he went with in that season. I think that was the name of the title. And I forget the other titles that he had at the time, but the Canadian Heavyweight Championship was his main title. Sailor White was his first champion. He was there in 77.
Yeah.
He didn't stick around very long. And then after probably 2 to 3 months is when all the Memphis guys came up. And then Dave Schultz was kind of his big star.
Yeah. Was Schultz... Because Dr. D, David Schultz, always worked better as a heel. Was he a heel for your grandfather?
He was, yes. And there's a story that I heard on Point of Coronet's podcast, and he tells a story of Dave Schultz. And Dave Schultz, he worked with Grand Prix as well.
Later on, right? In 81?
81 in the early 80s. But there's a I think his story is from when he was with International. There was a fight that broke out. I mean, the brawls were commonplace at these wrestling events back then. But yeah, a fight broke out, and I forget who he was with, but the guy that he said he was with was also part of International Wrestling's roster at the time. And they had to fight their way out of like the crowd, I guess, using hockey sticks, which is, very, very
I do remember that.
Yeah. So I think that happened in International.
Yeah, wasn't it the hockey boards, like the windows were gone.
Yeah.
So they had to jump over that and use hockey sticks.
Yeah.
I do remember that story.
That was International.
Sounds like they were at a BSHL hockey game.
That's the local hockey promotion around here.
Okay.
The World Tag Team titles, any stories on that and how that came to be?
For 77?
For 77.
To be honest, I'm not too sure about those titles specifically. I mean, I know the Bicentennial Kings, I think they were kind of like the big tag team at the time. I can, just bear with me 1 second. I can kind of dig through my records to see what the story was there. Sorry for the background noise.
No worries.
Yeah, because on the subject of them, it was stated that they arrived as tag team champions, actually.
And that was the... Yeah, which is... And they did that with a couple guys, like Tommy Gilbert. I forget what the angle was, but he started the season with the North American Championship without winning it from anybody.
In 76, right?
That's right, yes.
And he feuded
I have a
with the
picture
Brute.
of Tommy Gilbert with... yeah, that's right. The Brute was Bugsy McGraw.
Bugsy McGraw, yep.
Let's
Yeah, you sent me that picture of Tommy Gilbert with the North American title.
He's wearing the title backstage. It's over his shoulder.
I've always been curious on where these belts ended up.
Trust me, I've always been curious about that myself.
The first time I ever talked with Dave Arthur, that's one of the questions I asked. Do you have any of the belts?
Where's all the belts? Yeah.
And
I've always wondered that myself. I don't know
Corey question.
I don't know if Al auctioned them off later on, and they just kind of maybe ended up in the trash somewhere. But yeah, to be honest, all the belts. It's a shame we don't know what happened to those.
Yeah.
Steve Travis, Stonewall Jackson. Yeah, he was a big star in '77 too. He also held the Canadian heavyweight title.
Yeah.
Kind of going through my records here now.
We were actually talking a few months back, and there's a big theory on the maritime heavyweight title that Leo Burke first won in International, that we have a feeling that it might have become the maritime title in Grand Prix.
You very well could be right on that, because I think after International decided they weren't coming back, whatever happened between JJ and Al, and I think Clary Fleming was helping out in '84 as well, because there's interviews that JJ Dillon has done, and he said I think he was initially contacted by Clary to come on back, so I think Clary had a little bit more involvement in '84 as well. Sorry, what was the main point of that? I lost my train of thought here.
Tag titles or the maritime title?
Yeah, the maritime title, I think. But anyways, yeah. As far as where it ended up, I'm not too sure. But I'm just digging through the records of 77 here. It doesn't look like they were paying a whole lot of attention to the tag team titles then.
So just tag titles to have something to defend,
just to have tag titles, essentially. But it doesn't it doesn't look like they were a big part of the season in general.
Yeah. Going back to the maritime title for a second, there's also a theory that the original Grand Prix International title is that maritime title because it looks very similar. There are some pictures of Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo with
that's
a belt
right.
that looks very similar.
And sorry, that was the point I was trying to make, was I think Grand Prix might have absorbed some of their belts as well.
Yeah.
After International folded, and it was just Grand Prix. I think they might have absorbed some of the belts that they had, maybe just changed the names. But yeah, and I've often wondered that myself, because the belt for the Poffos is identical to Grand Prix.
Yeah, because I recently was sent. I had a picture of Lanny with a belt that looks very similar to the Maritime title. And then I saw a picture of Savage with the same belt.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't alive back then, just like I think the only one that would have been alive back then, sorry, Jason, was you. There's very little footage of it. We don't know.
That's right. And there's a picture of Randy Savage and Lanny when it's in the Maritimes, and it's for like the Grand Prix belt. But when you look at the belt, it's the Paphos belt from their territory.
I don't know
if yeah, exactly. It's the ICW belt. So I don't know if like people, and I just saw this. It was in a Facebook group where I saw the picture. So you never know what's factual and what isn't with stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they said the match was for Atlanta Grand Prix, like on this date, and this is a picture of them before the match. So, but either way, I don't know if they allowed the ICW belt to be defended in AGP or what.
It's possible because one of the knocks on Grand Prix Wrestling is them not making their own belts. Like for years, I think the international belt they ended up working with was a belt that was owned by Leo Burke.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I believe so. Let's move over to 1984 because that year we really glossed over. We missed a lot. Where do you want to start with this? Because this is, like I said, this is the meat and potatoes of this episode.
Yeah, 84 just in general was an interesting year for wrestling in the Maritimes because International, they wanted to come back in a big way and, kind of take, their dominant spot. And AGP, with International's absence, they had kind of settled in to their own spot and secured their spot as the top territory in the Maritimes. And then International came in and wanted to take it back. So it started with, I don't know if I specified this in part one, but they brought JJ in to book the territory.
Yeah. So
he was the main booker, and of course, he was managing before that. And then when he came back in '84 with International, that was when he became a competitor again. So he, of course, booked himself at the top of the bill. He was the champion starting off with the International World Heavyweight Championship, and I had said in part one that he had won that belt from Ted DiBiase. I forget the territory, but he won it in 1979. So he carried that belt with him into the startup of International. And Leo wasn't there at the beginning either. So they had, I can kind of find the roster here. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
Their top guy starting off that season, I believe, was Mark Lewin.
Yes, the Purple Haze.
That's right, yes. So he was feuding with JJ at the beginning of the season. And then a few months after is when Leo Burke came back. Rudy K and Bobby K were there, and so was the Beast at the beginning. But I forget what territory Leo was in at the time. He might have been in Japan.
He was in Japan. It was the UWF.
That's right. Yes.
The work shoot promotion, which also Cuban Assassin was there. There was like a. I think it was, maybe even No Class Bobby Bass might have been there. I'm not 100% sure on that. But I do remember Cuban and Leo being there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And then, Leo came back after a couple of months. Their main tag team was the Wild Samoans, but not the actual Wild Samoans. It was, I think it was Tio Tio and Chief Tapu. They're two guys that predominantly worked in Portland, the Portland territories. So that was kind of their main tag team, and then there was Kendo Nagasaki. He was the big heel, and I think it was Professor Kato. What was the other big heel during those days? And JJ was booking the territory, and he was the champion at first. And then Leo came back, and there was a couple of guys that they weren't big names, but they were kind of floating back and forth between Atlanta Grand Prix and International. I think one of them was Apple Foley, if you know who that is.
I've heard the name, but what did he work as other than Apple Foley?
To be honest, I don't know, because that was the first time I saw his name. just looking through old articles, one that jumped ship from AGP over to International, there was a guy named Danny Young. He jumped from AGP over to International. But then Big John Quinn, he jumped from International to AGP.
So John Quinn is probably more famous for his time in England.
Yeah, he worked in England. I believe he spent some time in Stampede as well.
Yeah.
And maybe a couple other Canadian territories. But yeah, he was one guy that seemed to be jumping ship from International over to Atlanta Grand Prix, and almost like the same week.
Really?
Yeah. But the most notable one was the Stomper.
That's what I was going to mention next, because that's the big one that we missed. So what's the story on the Stomper going from AGP to International?
I'm not sure the exact story. It's really only a good guess. I mean, money often plays a factor and a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the common denominator for the Stomper jumping ship from Atlanta Grand Prix, and he didn't jump ship until later in the season. It was more so towards the end when he came over. I think around like late July, maybe early August is when he came over. But I think the big factor in that was probably JJ Dillon. The Stomper was the first guy that JJ, I think, ever managed. I think that was in the Dallas territory.
I think so, yeah.
So I think that was in the early 80s. And then, JJ managed a few guys after him. But yeah, he was the very first, so I'm sure JJ probably played a big role in getting in the Stomper's ear and be like, hey, why don't you, come back over here and have some fun with us kind of thing. So, that would be my best guess. And then Stomper, sorry to cut you off, but he was also the North American champion for Atlanta Grand Prix at the time, too.
Yes.
And Leo Burke, and see, when I'm reading through old articles, they refer to Leo Burke's North American title as the AWA North American title. I don't know the accuracy of that, but they also refer to the Stomper's North American title as the NWA North American title, where Atlanta Grand Prix didn't have an NWA affiliation. So I'm not too sure what the mix-up is there, but I just refer to them as Atlanta Grand Prix's North American title and then International's North American title. But the Stomper came over and they unified the belts with Leo and the Stomper to see who the true North American champion was.
So at the time, in 1984, the Stomper goes over with the North American title. Burke, he has been champion since, I think, 76, 77. Mm-hmm. So he hadn't really lost the belt. He would eventually lose that belt in Maple Leaf Wrestling in 84, right, I believe, this year. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. To me, it's the international title and the global tag team titles. Mm-hmm. I've never seen pictures of them.
Nope.
Were there physical belts?
You can probably, and you might have to dig for a little bit on this, but when JJ initially won the title, you might be able to find pictures of him with it. But as far as titles go for pictures from that season of 84 on International, I personally haven't seen anything either from anything that I have.
So, to me, it's interesting because if we've talked about this before, the library is mostly gone. But if there's something that could be found, mm-hmm. it's 84.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, it would be anything from 84 is likely when people were recording episodes of, Atlanta Grand Prix or International.
There was a Facebook post made by Dave Boyce a few months ago.
Okay.
And a lady said that she had a boatload of VHS tapes
I remember
of
seeing
Leo
that.
Burke.
Mm-hmm.
And Boyce was like, could I see them? Could I get a copy of them? Because that at the end of the day,
she would be sitting on a gold mine if she had all that stuff.
100%.
And it's one of those things where it's trying to preserve not just Atlantic Grand Prix wrestling, not just international, but maritime wrestling history.
Oh, absolutely,
as a whole. Because
without that footage, without the international stuff, that's a big piece, probably. And again, I come from a point of bias, but it's one of the biggest pieces of maritime wrestling history that is relatively lost and unknown.
And I know you want to talk about Freddy Sweetan coming up, But that's one of the things to me that when I find a wrestler that there's so little about. Like I remember getting into very couple months searching on Chris Colt because I had no clue who Chris Colt was. He was this interesting character. When I found out about Freddy Sweetan, for a few months I ended up doing a video on this channel, and he's one of those guys where there's like one clip of him getting
it's a short,
tomahawk chopped. By Wahoo McDaniel.
Wahoo McDaniel, yep.
There's nothing on him. He died in 1974 on July 26th, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's nothing on him. He's been basically forgotten.
Yeah, and there's such a big chunk, and probably the most important chunk of his career was with international wrestling. And he was a top guy down here.
Yeah.
And he was predominantly a tag team wrestler. Like him and Eric Pomeroy seemed to be like they're one of the biggest tag teams I'd remembered for international wrestling.
Yeah.
But before his passing, he was going to be given a big push as a singles competitor. And that's kind of what makes his pass, and this is in 74. That season started off with him and Mike Dubois. They were a tag team. They had held the tag team trophy for a brief period in that season. And they eventually split up. That season started off with Great Kuma. He was kind of the main heel. He was the North American champion. He had eventually lost the belt to Eric Pomeroy, which is, Sweetan's old partner. So after Pomeroy beat him for the belt, they were setting up an angle for Sweetan to challenge Pomeroy for the North American Championship. And he was actually going to be booked to win. And this was, I don't know when this angle happened. I don't know if they set it up like the week before his passing, but it was relatively close to his passing. And he was booked to win the North American Championship, and he passed, unfortunately, before it could happen. Which makes his passing that much more sad and unfortunate.
That breaks my heart because his run in international reminds me of the Cuban Assassins run in Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Just the tag team specialist, doesn't matter who the partner is. Every season, the Cuban Assassin had the tag titles.
That's right.
Whether it be with the carpetbagger. Yeah. But that's the same thing with Freddy Sweetan. I think from his second year in international till 74, he held the tag titles.
That's right. And he was always like a top heel in a top heel tag team.
Yeah. And he just looked like one of those old school wrestlers. The gig marks on his head.
The gigged up forehead. And it just the stories you hear about him, like you never hear a bad thing about him, but you hear that he's one of the guys you wouldn't want to tangle with. A complete gentleman, but if you got on his bad side, you were in for a rough day.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but no, it's unfortunate that he passed before he was really getting his due.
Yeah, he died. You hear it all the time that most guys that would get the big run with a major title would be later on in their career, so late 30s, early 40s. It would have been around that time. He was 36 when he passed away.
That's right.
84, we also got, like you mentioned earlier, the Wild Samoans, which were the guys from Portland.
Portland, yep.
A lot of people aren't familiar with them. Was this their first time in the Maritimes?
No, they had wrestled for international previously. I believe their first year, I think it was 74 and 75, or just one or the other. But it was somewhere around the mid-70s. And they went by kind of different names. I think their Tio was one of the guys' names, and it was Chief Tapu. I can probably find what names they went by in my records here. Just 1 second. Bear with me here, sorry. But yeah, they went by slightly different names in 84.
Yeah, because a lot of people think of the Wild Samoans, they think of Afa and Sika in the WWF.
Exactly, and you're like, oh, no way, they were here? And then it's kind of like the Wish version of the Wild Samoans when you see pictures of them, unfortunately.
That happened a lot.
Yeah, that's right. No, I was going to say, but they were billed as a top tag team down here.
Yeah. That's one of the things that happens so much, like, back in the day. Like, even up till the 90s, like, you'd have a small independent show, and all of a sudden you have Ultimate Warrior in the card. And then this short Tubby guy would come out with face paint, and you're like, that ain't Jim Hellwig.
No.
They had a lot of names, From what I can see here, they were known at, during their careers as a tag team, they were known as the Wild Samoans, the Maoris, the New Guinea Headhunters.
Yep.
They were known as the Mongolians.
Another tag team nickname that they took.
The Mongolians and the Manchurians. So, there's a lot of names.
Oh, yeah.
Guys.
Yeah.
Yep, they definitely had a lot of names for sure.
But it was interesting. I did notice something about these guys, how they also arrived to international wrestling as, I think it was global tag team champions.
Yeah, and I believe that title might have came from Florida as well.
Yeah, because it was in 1984, actually. But I noticed something very, very curious about this title, how it has such a... So they arrived with the title in 1984, and for some reason, it changed hands, but there's no dates or anything. But it has to be 1984. And it went to... it was Kay and Gallant.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it came back to the Samoans.
Okay, yeah. See, there's no online records from 84. Everything from 84 you can piece together through articles. Okay. But for some reason, there's no records online from the 84 season. Not too sure why that is. But I feel like it's something that should probably be put together. I could probably do something like that with the information I have.
I think you'd be the best to do that.
With all you have, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, on that 1984 year, I was just checking a couple of things, kind of doing my research, and I noticed as well that JJ Dillon he was the international heavyweight champion for international wrestling in May of 1984 and made his WWF debut at the Madison Square Garden on April 23rd of 1984 against Tito Santana for the IC title. Yeah.
Huh. That I didn't know. That's interesting.
A month after he's the international champion, right? So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I think, it's like Dave said, though, I think he had the belt.
He did have, yes. He won it from Ted DiBiase. Why he would have defended that in WWF, I'm not too sure. But yeah, no, that's interesting.
He went up against Tito Santana for the IC title.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that was, again, he didn't start competing full time, at least the articles that I have, wasn't until 84, was when he came back from managing and wanted to compete as a wrestler.
Yeah, but he also started managing in 84 as well.
Yeah, Kendo Nagasaki, right?
Zambui Express, something like that.
Yeah, he did manage Kendo Nagasaki in international wrestling as well. Kendo Nagasaki was kind of his stooge.
A stooge?
Yeah, it was kind of his stooge in international wrestling.
His stooge, okay. Thought he stooged somebody out.
No. But no, that's kind of the role that he played, plus being a top heel.
Yeah. Is there anything else from 1984 that you can think of?
I'm trying to think. Let me dig through some articles here. Other than the names that they wanted to bring in, which I think we covered in part one.
I think the big one was Dusty Rhodes, right?
The roster, the big name was Dusty Rhodes. That was a name that's been mentioned in quite a few articles. They wanted to bring Ric Flair in for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. They wanted to bring back Andre. They essentially wanted to bring back all the big names that they had in their heyday in the 70s. Barry Windham, they wanted to bring him in. I'm looking at an article right now where he's advertised. So I don't know what fell through there. Yeah. Yeah, I can show you the picture real quick, but sorry.
Look at that.
Can you see that a little bit? Sorry. There we go.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah.
Was he Barry Windham or Blackjack Mulligan Jr.?
He was Barry Windham then.
Barry Windham?
Yeah, so I'm not too sure what fell through there, or why a lot of the names that they had advertised fell through. I think it was mostly probably wishful thinking at the time with JJ Dillon and the connections that he had, and kind of put the cart before the horse, so to speak.
Yeah.
We mentioned it in the first episode we did, but just to get a refresher, what happened with the downfall of International in 1984?
That's a good question. Because they considered that season a success. And mind you, looking at the crowd turnouts for that year was nowhere near what it was during their heyday. But they had considered that season a success. And I don't know, I think JJ briefly touches on it in some of his interviews that he's done. But I think it essentially all came down to money.
Okay.
Money, and unfortunately, Al's attitude and working relationship, he kind of tended to butt heads with a lot of the people that he was in business with. So I think money and, just general working relationship with Al probably soured JJ's opinion on the area.
I know Al, once 84 was over, he was done running his own promotion. He worked with WCW. We talked about the Ammonia League thing. What, just fantasy booking in your own head, is there a situation or a time period where you could have seen Al come back to wrestling in the Maritimes?
The landscape had changed so much at that point where I don't know if, you look at somebody like Emile Dupree, he was kind of able to stick around even with, WWF taking up every wrestler on the planet and signing them. So, and with Al, it was either go big or go home. It was either all or nothing with him. He wanted big names, big events, and if he couldn't have that, then he wanted no part of it at all.
So he there's just no possibility that he could have brought back the shop.
I don't think so. Because with the names that were signed between WCW, WWF, they wouldn't have been able to commit to a full-time basis to what he wanted. I don't know. I think the relationship with him and the Cormiers had soured again as well. They were able to patch things over as the years went on. And Al went down to one of their it was one of their events in the early 2000s. He went to an event down there after they had patched things up. But if he couldn't get all the big local names plus big names within the wrestling world in general, then he didn't really want any part of it.
Yeah, that's it's unfortunate because I've seen Grand Prix wrestling live. I think everybody but Mark has been to a Grand Prix show. But International is something that it was long dead, before I was even born.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that was the case.
Yeah. Is there any
stories that you hear about, the crowds and just their heyday in the 70s, near sellouts every Tuesday at the Forum, at the Halifax Forum.
Yeah.
So it was a big deal back then. Plus, with the names that he was bringing in, like Harley Race, he was there in 1974. You had Jack Briscoe come in 75 when they had their NWA affiliation. Dory Funk was here on a few different occasions. And then Terry Funk, when he was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, he came in 1976.
Mm-hmm. Those are huge names, 70s wise. This is one of the things that annoys me about current wrestling fans is they don't know those names.
No, and when Harley Race came in, he was here for a couple weeks. He had a small feud with Leo Burke. They had feuded over the Taped Fist trophy, and they also feuded over the North American Championship, which Harley Race also held when he was here.
Yeah. I have a few old international wrestling books, the programs. I found that in my stepdad's chest, and
awesome.
And there's a few pictures of Harley Race in there,
and those are rare photos as well.
Absolutely.
Those are the timing was perfect for them to be putting together an album, and he just so happened to be there, and then they were able to take some rare photos of Harley Race that are only those are international wrestling's photos.
Yeah. We touched a little bit on the Mongols on our first interview.
Yeah.
And something that I only found out, I think, after is, was it Gito Mongol?
Oh,
he's from Spring. Yes. He's from
he's
Spring
from
Hill.
Spring Hill. Yep. Yeah. Trained. He trained Bill Eadie. And one of the points I was going to make in '74, after Freddy Sweetan had passed away, that's when they gave the big run to Bill Eadie, Bolo Mongol.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if their plans for what they ended up doing with Bill Eadie, that was going to be what they wanted to do with Freddy, because Bill Eadie had a big run here in 74.
Absolutely.
He dominated pretty much half the season, and he was their North American champion.
What's interesting about that is the Mongols show up after Freddy Sweetan passed away. They're not on the cards before that.
No,
so they needed a quick fix.
Exactly. And I don't know if they saw something in Bill at the time. But yeah, they were only a tag team very briefly when they first came in, and they were split up almost instantly. It was only a couple of weeks that they were a tag team. And then Jito, I think he tagged with Great Kuma. He had held the tag team trophy with in 74.
Yeah.
And Bola was the top of the bill.
Which is interesting to see what, for anybody that don't know who Bill Eadie is, he had 3 successful gimmicks. He was Bolo Mongol, he was the Masked Superstar, and he was Axe from Demolition.
That's right.
Right.
And there was an interview that he did, and he has nothing but good things to say about his time down here. Said he was treated well, the money was good. He had even named his daughter after, I don't know if it was from a beach around here or something like that, but the place left that much of an impression on him that, he named his daughter or something like that after a beach around here.
Yeah.
Might be a little off in the details, but it was something like that.
It's interesting because I didn't know that. But one of the things about Bill Eadie, that was his first championship belt, right? I don't think he had been a champion before that.
No, and sorry to kind of go off on another tangent, but JJ won his first title down here as well.
Really?
Yeah, he was the North American Championship. I think it was 72 or 73, but that was his first singles title that he won, was down here. It's a shame that he doesn't give his time that he spent down here enough credit.
That's the one thing when you listen to an RF shoot interview from back in the day or whatever shoot interview is when they get to the maritime portion, like even Renee almost had nothing. Yeah, it's just a gloss over.
Roddy Piper, when you watch his documentary that WWE put out like this was years ago now, when Piper was still alive, but he mixes up he mixes international wrestling up with Atlanta Grand Prix.
Yeah, because he calls it Emile Dupree's territory, and I don't think...
No, as far as I know, and I stand to be corrected, but as far as I know, he never spent any time in Atlanta Grand Prix. He came down to International in 1975 for pretty much a summer. He was brought in by Lord Alfred Hayes. And then from there, he moved on to, I think it was Hollywood, and it might have been NWA Hollywood he went to after he was down here. Yeah. But, and it's a shame that a lot of those guys will either mix up the two promotions or it's just a gloss over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a shame that they don't give the times they spent down here enough credit.
Would you say, I know this is just fantasy booking again, or I don't know if you call it fantasy booking, but how would you compare international wrestling? Because international was clearly the bigger territory in the Maritimes. Mm-hmm. How would you compare a territory like
Contrary to popular belief.
Yeah. But how could you compare to a territory like that to a territory elsewhere, like in the States or other parts of Canada? Because from everything I keep seeing about international wrestling, it was a hotbed of wrestling.
It was, and the thing is, they were on the verge of their big breakout, in my opinion. Just 76, they were about to break out into being one of the prime Canadian territories, and unfortunately that's when everything fell apart.
Yeah.
So to me, if the Cormiers and Al, if they were able to work out their differences and they were able to just do business, they would have went down as one of the great Canadian territories, along with the Stampedes, with the Maple Leafs, with the Grand Prix out of Montreal. They definitely would have been in that conversation for sure.
Yeah, especially for the fact where the Maritimes locations are so close together. So
exactly.
Traveling, going from Moncton to Halifax or Fredericton, everything is all within a few hours of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Calgary to Edmonton, or you know what I mean?
And Calgary to Vancouver and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was a relative, and not only that, their seasons only ran during the spring and the summer, so it was relatively easy travel. Whereas some like a Stampede, as far as I know, they ran year round, so they had to deal with like the winter elements and all that stuff.
So Stampede did not run the year round; they took the summers off.
Oh, is that right?
Because of the Calgary Stampede, they never wanted to work that.
Yeah. You're right. Now that you mentioned that, yeah, that's true.
I remember Honky Tonk Man. He said he never came to the Maritimes, but everybody from Calgary would leave Calgary to go to the Maritimes because there was no wrestling in the summer.
Yeah, that's right. And that's when, Al would do business with Stu. And it's funny, Al used to say, I used to speak to Bret Hart on the phone when I would talk to Stu. I was like, I think Bret might have been a little too old at that point. I don't think Bret was like, hey, Stu, give me the phone. I'd like to see who you're talking to. Maybe it was Owen that he spoke to at the time.
Maybe.
But I definitely don't think it was Bret. But anyways.
Is there anything else that we could mention about international wrestling? Piece of information you have before we end this interview?
I think the Freddy Sweetan story was the main one I wanted to touch on because, and to be honest, I wish I had found that piece of information when you were putting together that episode about Freddy Sweetan. So unfortunately, I didn't see that till after the fact. But yeah, that was one thing I wanted to include, and also just JJ Dillon's overall history down here. That it was a much bigger deal than what he makes it out to be, in my opinion.
I agree. In my opinion, it was his, you can't compare it to the Four Horsemen in the mid-'80s in Jim Crockett promotion, but as a performer, I don't think he's had a bigger break anywhere but the Maritimes.
No, and if you read through old articles, he credits this territory for giving him his big, breakout moments and stuff like that, and treating him like a star, which he was. He was mostly a heel down here, but there was some times where he was a babyface, mostly earlier in his career.
And I still wish there was footage of that.
No, absolutely. It would be cool to see a young JJ Dillon just, starting out and coming into his own. It'd be cool to see old footage of Roddy Piper, too. Reading through old articles, you can tell he hasn't quite come into his own yet, but he was a baby face. The crowds were getting behind him, and just certain things you read, you can see him shades of Hot Rod, where he's a bit of a hothead, and he'll during matches he'll be a bit of a hothead. But anyways, no, it's cool to read through all that stuff, and just at the same time you wish there was footage of that, and just seeing old Roddy Piper promos from international wrestling, that'd be pretty cool.
See how good he was back in the 70s.
Yeah, exactly. Clary Fleming did an interview where he said he was a little more preserved and shy. So, it'd be interesting to see some of that stuff.
Yeah, if you get a chance, his kids released a book called Rowdy, and they mentioned the Maritimes in the book.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
did they get the territory right?
I don't think they mentioned international.
Yeah, which
Grand Prix,
they to be honest, they probably don't know themselves. But
they mentioned it quite a bit of how he cool. Really. Yeah, it's a really good book too. It's a really
I'd like to read that.
Yeah,
awesome.
Well, this has been a blast from the past, a trip down memory lane. Anytime that you can talk about international wrestling, the more we can get stuff out about international wrestling, it's the goal here. If anybody's listening to this and you are sitting on some VHS tapes, maybe some Betamax tapes, I don't know what they had back then, let us know. We would love to see if we can find anything from international wrestling.
Anything in general. I mean, I've seen... one thing I'm lacking photo albums, and I'm lacking match programs for my personal collection. But if anybody has that stuff, by all means, send it to the boys. We'd love to take a look at it.
Absolutely.
And one thing that I need to do is I need to get down to the Nova Scotia archives and look up some articles for 76 and 77 to try and piece some things together for that as well.
Absolutely. Well, with that being said, thank you, boys, for being here. Big thank you to Dave Arthur. Once again, if you have any questions, you can hit us up, or you can hit up Dave Arthur on social media. Any questions about international wrestling, you have an Instagram on international wrestling?
Yes, I'm not as active on there as I used to be, but if you message me, I'll definitely respond. International Wrestling _HFX.
Trust me, I spent a few hours when he showed me that Instagram, and I kind of stole a few pictures there with championship belts. I'm a belt mark, so I do that. So
again, by all means, if you have any questions or just any input at all, I would love to hear it.
Absolutely. So with that being said, big thank you to Dave Arthur. We will see you again next week. Until then, take care, everybody.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Unofficial Maritime Wrestling Podcast. We drop new episodes every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Atlantic Time, so make sure to join us each week. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and also listen to the episodes and interviews on all your favorite podcast platforms, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. And if you want to support us even further, grab one of our t-shirts over at Pro Wrestling Tees. Just scan the QR code to get yours. Until next time, thanks for listening and supporting Maritime Wrestling.